1.2 million children worldwide could die in the next 6 months due to disrupted health services and food supplies caused by lockdown. The World Food Programme and UNICEF are particularly fearful, calling for action to prevent the pandemic from becoming a hunger catastrophe. We're joined now by Sajad Mahmood, Chief Executive of Charity Right, a global NGO that focuses on providing food for children in developing countries. Sajad, thank you very much for talking to us. How bad could this get? I mean, 1.2 million deaths. I mean, that is a horrific figure, if that's right.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's an outrageous figure. 1.2 million deaths is what Dr. Steve and his team have worked out from various modelling research that they've been carrying out for the last few months. And the reality on the ground, I guess, and the fear is that it could be a lot worse.
And so what can be done about it? I mean, Britain has quite a proud record of stepping up to the plate when these things happen and providing a lot of development aid and money. Other countries possibly seem more reluctant in these circumstances. Everyone's concentrating on their own country and trying to win the battle against coronavirus. What are the major donors doing about this?
I think some of that is related, or some of the issues are related to not having enough funds, but I think some of it is, unfortunately, some of those developing countries are looking towards the West, they're looking towards the UK, towards Europe, to see really how they can deal with the problems at home. And unfortunately, it's been a blanket policy, so they have seen that, the UK and various other countries in Europe have created a lockdown and enforced a lockdown. They've done, and just followed suit. So they have done exactly the same. But unfortunately, the circumstances in those countries are not the same. So whereas here in the UK, we're able to survive within our homes with all the luxuries that we have and still have access to supermarkets, and the government, I guess, filling in where people are maybe falling short. Those countries don't have that. And let's just take one example. India is one of the largest providers of free school meals in the world. 120 million children will have a meal every day through their free schools meal program. And that's, through around 1 million sites that they have. Those have all closed. So there's 120 million children there that were relying on a school meal that are now sat at home, wondering where their meal was going to come from on the day. And this is replicated in many other countries. My organisation that works in Bangladesh, we have the same scenario. We work in the slums of Dhaka in Bangladesh, for example, where I'm sure recently you have heard around 4 million workers have lost their jobs pretty much overnight from garment factories. Now, that impacts around 20 million people, and many of them, again, are children. So it's not necessarily just about, finding the funds. I think some of those countries also have to look at the way they adapt their modelling and also take it kind of region by region. So the slums in Dhaka are very different from, I guess, a rural area maybe in the outskirts of Bangladesh. So I think it's just making sure that we don't have a blanket policy. And of course, the UK has always supported developing countries around the world and has been there to make sure that we can look after their needs at their time of stress. And I guess those donors are still out there and still need to kind of step up to the plate and make sure that we don't have a catastrophe on our hands.
And there'll be lots of our listeners who are very generous at times like this, thinking, well, I'd quite like to help people in Bangladesh or India that you've described. What's the best way for them to do that?
I guess there are many organisations that are working there at this moment in time. UNICEF and BRAC, for example, in Bangladesh, are key. My organisation, Charity Right, is also working on the ground there. We're one of a few organisations that are still providing food within the slum area. So, we've been looking after a number of thousands of children that were literally coming to school because they had this promise of a free school meal. And those children now still come to the school just to pick up their meal and to go back home. So there are many different options, and I think as you put that into any search engine, into Google, there's hundreds of organisations that will come up. But I guess people are well aware of UNICEF and BRAC, and I guess my organisation also working on the ground there, that you can support them through those networks, and we're still providing some sort of aid on the ground.
Well, Sajad, thank you very much for talking to us. That's Sajad Mahmood, Chief Executive of Charity Right.